Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will face a confidence vote on Monday, paving the way for an early election next year. Now, this comes after Germany's governing coalition collapsed last month when the chancellor fired his finance minister in a long dispute over the country's weak economy. Now, the German chancellor called the vote himself. If he loses it, he will have to ask Germany's president Frank-Walter Steinmeier to dissolve parliament in a process which would trigger snap elections. Now, new elections must be held within 60 days of parliament being dissolved. A vote of confidence has so far been called 5 times in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany. The last time was almost 20 years ago by former SPD Chancellor Gerhard Schröder.
Guten Morgen.
Germany is at a political crossroads as Chancellor Olaf Scholz faces a decisive vote of confidence. Now, TVP World spoke to Andreas Sumland from the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, who talked about the difficulties facing Germany and its economy and said that countless failures, ranging from tensions to disunity, are the reason why Scholz's coalition ultimately failed.
The coalition for the last 3 years has been the first three-party coalition in the history of the Federal Republic of Germany, and it is now seen by many commentators as not a success because there has been a lot of tension, a lot of discussion within the coalition, disunity, and also economic stagnation or even decline to a certain degree, and this has been largely blamed on this coalition, although one has to say that the current stagnating situation in which Germany is in, if you look at the economic data, is largely a legacy of the failures of the previous chancellors or the previous chancellor, Angela Merkel, who has missed to initiate a number of innovations in the German economy and public administration that were needed and that were delayed. And only now Germany is trying to introduce these innovations, these necessary innovations. But it will now take some time before they take effect.
Speaking to journalists ahead of the Foreign Affairs Council on Monday, the EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas announced the agenda of the meeting, which includes the situation in Syria, Ukraine, and Georgia. Now, Kallas said EU foreign ministers would adopt the 15th sanctions package against Russia during the gathering.
We are having 3 main topics. First Syria, then Ukraine, and then Georgia. On Ukraine, the foreign ministers today will adopt the 15th sanctions package. It includes the shadow fleet, sanctioning the shadow fleet. It includes also sanctioning the North Korean officials, as well as the Chinese companies who are enabling this war. So it sends a clear message that whoever enables this war to continue has a price to pay.
Protests in Georgia over the decision to postpone EU accession talks have continued for nearly 3 weeks now. Now, among the protesters are election observers who have reported alleged election rigging and irregularities. Now, our TVP World correspondent Don Arleth is in Tbilisi and has this next report.
Day 18 in the protests here in Tbilisi and around Georgia continue. This time, some of the election workers and election observers are marching through the streets of Tbilisi. They have just arrived here in front of Parliament, and the protests are starting to become underway. I spoke with one of the observers, and she told us what she witnessed during the elections.
Our demand is that we want new elections because this one was rigged, brutally rigged, with every known and unknown possible ways. So these elections are not showing the people's choice, and we want a new one with a new government and with the help of international community. Every observer had the feeling when they were there that elections were rigged even before the elections, because the people who were coming and going to the electoral booth, they already knew what their response would be, because outside they were people who were paying them, and also there was a lot of the new IDs, and most probably they were given these IDs prior to the elections, purposefully to rig the elections. We definitely need international observers here because right now we don't have the government. They are de facto government, and if they are going to put the new elections, it will be the same. So there's no point in that. So we need international help.
Now, of course, the protesters have several demands, the most important one being new, free, fair elections. Others, such as releasing all those that have been detained by the police in these protests out of jail. Of course, there's been over 500 people detained in the protests that have been going on here since November 28th. The demands are still there, and people are still taking to the streets to ask for free and fair elections here in Tbilisi. Reporting from Tbilisi, Don Arleth, TVP World.
Now, as demonstrations continue in Tbilisi, Elizabeth Bra, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, joined TVP World to talk about the impact of the ongoing protests and the determination of Georgian society.
Well, what we can see from the protests is that they're continuing and that the people who participate are determined. But the question is what impact that will have. Those in charge can decide to ignore it. And clearly the presidential election or the outcome will be carried out as planned, regardless of these protests. I think what we are seeing is a split in Ukrainian society, both between ordinary Georgian society, both between ordinary Georgians and then at the same time Georgians and the ruling party, and it's unclear how the protesters, how they can achieve what they want to achieve, even though we in the West consider it laudable and indeed the only path forward for Georgia.
Ukraine will send humanitarian aid to Syria. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky made the announcement on Sunday and said the support would operate under the Grain from Ukraine program.
Today I discussed with our government officials, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Agriculture, the issue of food aid under the Grain from Ukraine program, in particular aid for Syria. This is our humanitarian program, which has already done a lot to stabilize the food situation in difficult regions of the world. Now we can help Syrians with Ukraine wheat, flour and our oil, our products that are globally used to ensure food security.
Winter on the front line is never easy, and the coming presidency of Donald Trump in the United States could throw another wrench in the works for Ukraine. TVP World spoke to Chris Morris from the University of Portsmouth, who says that Ukraine has been overstretched for some time now.
Now, Ukraine is struggling with systematic problems, one of them being, the supply of Western arms, which is a dribble at times, and also just keeping enough people mobilized to really address, this extended front line. Ukraine has been overstretched for quite a while now. Now, Russia is kind of counting that it can continue to push through, and really what I suppose it's looking for is to arrive in a more and more favorable position by the time January rolls around, when both sides are effectively going to be expecting an ultimatum from the US president. Russia doesn't seem to like its people very much, whereas Ukraine is, intent on... We've heard this recently from Zelensky. It's, Ukraine is about the people, and maintaining the population is a key aspect of Zelensky's strategy. Russia doesn't really have this problem, so it can endure for an extended amount of time, severe casualties on the front line. Recently as well, it's been able to enlist North Koreans, significant numbers of those, in some of its offensives. So, there are few nations on earth that are equipped to lose men at the rate and consistency that Russia is losing casualties. And, even if Ukraine is capable of mounting a valiant defense of its territory, the arithmetic is going to stack up in the end. And increasingly, that's what we're seeing. Ukraine is simply struggling to maintain, this tempo of operations, this tempo of losses. And losses are mounting, and it's a huge problem.
Israel has announced that it will shut its embassy in Dublin over what it calls the extreme anti-Israel policies of the Irish government. Now, in a post on social media, Irish Prime Minister Simon Harris commented on Israel's decision, saying it is, quote, deeply regrettable. He also added that his government would not change its position on how the war in Gaza is being fought.
This is deeply regrettable decision from the Netanyahu government. I utterly reject the assertion that Ireland is anti-Israel. Ireland is pro-peace, pro-human rights and pro-international law.
In anticipation of New Year's Eve celebrations, Austrian authorities have decided to crack down on illegal fireworks. Now, every car traveling from the Czech Republic is waved aside and inspected by border officers who are searching for fireworks smugglers. Now, each year, the Austrian police confiscate hundreds of kilograms of fireworks. On top of stronger security at the Czech-Austrian border, officials in Vienna came out with a public service announcement. Authorities warned that illegal fireworks can be dangerous and advised buying only certified local products. They also advised that using illegal fireworks can lead to serious health risks on top of severe fines imposed by Austrian police. The head of South Korea's ruling People Power Party has resigned following the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Now, his statement coincided with South Korean investigators' request for the impeached president to appear for questioning. Now, South Korean law enforcement expanded a probe into whether the decree constituted a rebellion.
국민의힘 당 대표직을 내려놓습니다.
I am resigning from my position as the leader of the People's Power Party. The resignation of the Supreme Council members has destroyed the Supreme Council, making it impossible for me to carry out my normal duties as the leader of the party. I sincerely apologize to all the people who are suffering from this emergency situation. If we had not lifted the martial law that night, there could have been bloodshed between our citizens who would have taken to the streets and our young soldiers the following morning. That night, I was deeply afraid I might not be able to prevent such a tragedy.
The sudden fall of the Assad regime has stunned the world and raised many questions about the future of Syria. Now, relations between the Syrian rebels and Sunni forces with Syrian Kurds will be crucial for the future of the country. This is what Konrad Zashtovt from the University of Warsaw told TVP World.
HTS is only in the control of south, the central part of the country, and of course the western part of Syria, which they had even previously. The Idlib province. But we have also still northeast, which is controlled by Syrian democratic forces. So this autonomy of Syrian Kurds, where not only the Kurds live, of course, there are also the Arabs and many other minorities living there, including Christians. But this territory is not controlled by Damascus. And now, of course, the biggest question about the next phase of this conflict is how this relationship between HTS and Sunni forces in the country with these Kurds from Syria, how it will evolve.
And that's all for this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more news and features here on TVP World.